want to welcome everybody. Thank you for dialing in here to the cybersecurity chat series. We're coming to you from the National Cryptologic Museum. This is the Cyber Center for Education and Innovation. We're at Fort Meade, Maryland, right outside of the National Security Agency. And so we are very pleased today, and more than pleased, we are honored to have Steve Bellovin as our speaker today. He is a professor in computer science at Columbia University, and you're in for a treat. Steve is not only been in this environment for a long time, but his awards and accolades are plentiful. He is part of the Cybersecurity Hall of Fame, which is not easy to get into. And he's also a member of the National Academy of Engineering and serving with the Computer Science and Telecommunications Board at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. So Steve is going to be talking to us today about this wonderful topic of cybersecurity, and he's also going to be giving you some insight into his life and why he got into cyber. As most of you know, there's over 500,000 openings in cybersecurity today, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the talk. But Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so as Mark said, I'm a professor at Columbia. I've been here about 15 years. But before that, I was a research scientist at Bell Labs and AT&T Labs research. I've also done a couple of stints in government in advisory positions because a lot of different fields have a cybersecurity and privacy component, and the lawyers and who tend to be the regulators don't know much about this, so I got to be a translator for it. I got into security almost by accident. Actually, I caught my first hackers around 1971 when I was in college working part-time. It was a different time and age. I looked at what they were doing, and one I hired, the other I sent to the dean. But after graduate school, I was doing work doing system programming, system administration, and working on networking, and occasionally something would go wrong. And I said to myself, gee, what would happen if somebody did this intentionally instead of by accident? And that's how I got into security, looking at ordinary failures. It turns out a lot of security comes from thinking outside the rules. I'm not going to talk too much about that. What I am going to talk about today is security is a systems problem. You have to fix many different things to be secure. You know, the metaphor is a chain is as strong as its weakest link. That's the way it is with security. You don't go, if you're an attacker, you don't go through strong security, you go around it. And that makes life very hard for the defender. So let me go share my screen here. And so as I said, cybersecurity is a systems problem. And what I want to say is I want to go use as an example, buying something online from a website. You're going to enter a credit card number, but credit card numbers are frequently stolen online. And the question is, how do we protect it? How do we prevent our credit card numbers from being stolen? Or if we're running the website, how do you prevent customers' credit card numbers from being stolen? And when companies get this wrong, it can cost them literally hundreds of millions of dollars and cost the CEO the job. And this has happened. The first two questions you always ask about security: what are you trying to protect and from whom? And I have to stress the from whom part. Different attackers have different powers and different goals. You know, someone might be trying to steal credit card numbers if they're just an ordinary thief. If they're an intelligence agency, they might be looking for patterns of behavior, or they might be a competitor trying to figure out how you're running your store that's better than theirs. This is always the first thing to ask. What are you trying to protect and from whom? Now, if you get the threat model wrong, bad things happen. So you look at the top picture in the upper right. Somebody thought that they could go lock up the bike by the tire. The thief didn't want the front tire, the thief wanted the whole bike. So the front tire is securely locked to that pole and the rest of the bike is gone. Or if you've got this gate in the middle of the roadway entering a parking lot and the gate's not operating, people could just drive on the grass. It's a power you didn't think about. People are driving on the grass. They didn't have the right defenses here. So you've got to think about that. What are you what are you really protecting? What might your attacker do? When we're talking about credit card numbers, we're generally talking about ordinary thieves. They want money or something easily convertible to money. Credit card numbers are good. You can sell them on the black market. There are underground websites where people sell these things. But an ordinary thief is not going to go after defense secrets. Why? Because they can't easily monetize them. They don't have a convenient foreign intelligence agency that they can go to and say, hey, I just stole the missile plans. What will you pay me for them? But they're ordinary thieves. They want money. They do know how to hack. These are cyber thieves, not street thieves. They don't have intelligence agency grade skills or devices. They're not foreign intelligence agencies. They're ordinary criminals with technical skills. And that means I don't need something that's super strong. I don't need something that's as strong as the National Security Agency uses to protect its secrets. I'm not trying to deal with a foreign intelligence agency here. So the first threat, and this one was realized from the very dawn of the commercial web, about 1994, 1995, stealing credit card numbers in transit. If I send a credit card number over the internet, how do I know that someone's not going to wiretap the internet and pick it up? And it sounds like a preposterous thing. How do you wiretap the internet? But in 1993, this actually happened. So 1994, when people were starting to get the idea of selling things online, they said, okay, maybe we'd better protect against someone else wiretapping it. Prevent you picking up credit card numbers in mid-flight. Well, there's a simple defense, or simple conceptually. It's actually been very hard to do correctly. You encrypt the communication. An ordinary thief cannot break encryption. Internet encryption isn't perfect. It's about 25 years old, and I've watched about 5 different versions of it come and go because flaws were found in the earlier versions. But again, we're not dealing with an intelligence agency here. An ordinary thief can't break encryption if it's even halfway decent. The encryption that we use to protect the web is used for other more sensitive things, so we need to get it right. But good enough, there are no known instances of credit card numbers being stolen because someone took advantage of the older flaws in the way web traffic is encrypted. But it's not enough just to protect the communication. You have to send the credit card number to the website. They need that in order to bill you for what you're buying. Many websites store this. You buy something, say, from Amazon, it will store your credit card, make it easier to buy again. This means that an attacker can hack into the website and get your credit card number that way. And that has happened. Target, Home Depot, each lost tens of millions of credit card numbers to hackers. You've got to protect against that too, not just in flight, but someone hacking into the site. And it's not just the web server. Every modern website is using a database or more than one database. Often this is on a separate computer. I won't go into the details right now, but if the website is programmed incorrectly, an attacker can construct a weird query to the website to go through the web server to attack the database. For example, instead of searching for something on Amazon, you type a very weird specific search string into the search box. If Amazon was not programmed correctly, you'd get into Amazon's database computers. And one of those databases will hold your credit card number. So even if the web server itself doesn't get hacked, you can go through it to get what you really want. Well, we can protect this too. You can harden the site, try to get rid of the programming flaws that let you get at the databases, put up firewalls, all sorts of defenses. And again, this is an ongoing thing because you put up a defense and someone finds a new attack and you need to strengthen your defenses. But it's another thing. This is not the same as encryption. This is hardening a website. This is building a firewall. This is programming things correctly. Attackers can also try to get your password with things like phishing attacks. I'm sure many of you have seen emails saying, oh, your account at Amazon is going to be locked unless you enter your password right now to reset it, or your bank account. It's called a phishing attack. They send out these bulk emails and hope that somebody falls for it. Or they can try to guess your password. We get all these crazy rules about strong passwords. That's been a weak passwords, a problem that's been known for over 40 years. And there the really weak point is human behavior. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is a remarkably common password. But the attackers know this too. So there are all kinds of things. It's human behavior that we've got to guard against here. Well, we could have defenses of strong passwords or what's called two-factor authentication. Maybe you need an app on your phone or receive a text message. The attacker needs not just your password, but perhaps your phone number or a secret key that's hidden inside the app on your phone in order to log in. Your password alone won't do it. And the real lesson here is that no one defense is good enough. You've got to protect all parts of the system. Remember what I said at the beginning. Attackers are not going to go through the strong security. So I might have absolutely perfect encryption for protecting my communication, and that's great. But if somebody hacks into the web server, they can steal it that way. If someone can trick me into downloading some malware onto my own computer, they can plant a keystroke logger on my computer. And when we strengthen one defense, the attackers go around that defense and find another weak spot. So defenders have to think about the entire system, not just one or two pieces. And this is what makes it really interesting and really valuable is there are so many different skills necessary to secure even ordinary websites. Doing the encryption correctly requires a thorough knowledge of cryptology. And these days, that's a branch of applied mathematics. You need better human factors and psychology. How do people react to certain messages? But that's what's happening with phishing attacks. People are being tricked into falling for these messages. They're not correct, but people are falling for them. To build a firewall, you have to understand networking. Years ago, I said I worked on network security because I was working on firewalls so much. That was where it seemed to be. Programming, you need correct programming to avoid some of the flaws. You know, people talk about passwords and strong passwords, but a very high percentage of attacks are due to ordinary bugs in ordinary computer programs. So you need good programmers. There are many, many more skills. System administration, system operation. Your system administrators are your frontline defense against attackers because they're installing patches. And most hacks are due to websites, systems that are not patched correctly. You need a systems perspective in order to get through, in order to defend your systems against these attackers, because the attackers are going to try everything. So I will leave time for any questions that you have.
What kind of advice would you give a high school student as they're preparing themselves to enter either right out of high school or into college?
First, as I said, there is a very wide range of jobs and a very wide range of educational backgrounds. System administration, if you know what you're doing, can be done with anything from a high school degree to a PhD. I was doing it after I got my doctorate, but I was also doing it in college and high school once I had learned how to program. So there's tremendous variety of different things. I think the best thing to do early on is to explore. You certainly want to learn programming, even if programming is not going to be your role at Fence, because this is what lets you understand what's really going on and where the weak points are going to be. A lot of system administration doesn't require programming. A lot is a lot better if you do know how to program. And certainly in high school, I would certainly learn to do that. Experiment. Try things. Play around with your own computers or computers you have permission to do weird things. You know, hacking happens when people, I hate to use the cliche, but think outside the box, color outside the lines. A friend of mine had an interesting anecdote, and I used this in my last book. He was talking with somebody else about this educational toy, Uncle Milty's ant farm. You buy it in a box and you don't actually get the ants in the box. Instead, you get a reply card, which you mail back in, and they send you a tube full of live ants. And his friend said, "Oh, I didn't know you could send live ants through the mail." And my friend, who's a security person, said, "Oh, I didn't know I could fill in somebody else's address and get the post office to deliver live ants to anybody I wanted." That wasn't the intent, of course, of the card, but this is what I mean by thinking about it differently.
Wouldn't that be a hoot? Start
Imagine
sending
opening a package and finding a tube full of live ants. Yes. Why do I have this? I don't want ants in my house.
Oh my goodness.
Security problems happen when you think differently. I'll give you a more technical example. One of the earliest serious security holes is what's known as a buffer overflow. And I can by analogy, it's 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound sack. The technical answer is what happens if the computer is trying to read some number of characters. Type in your username. Usernames can be up to 25 characters. What happens if you type 26 or 28 or 30 characters? Well, a properly programmed computer is going to reject it or ignore the excess characters. But if you weren't careful in your programming, then you're going to overwrite a different part of the computer's memory and be able to break in that way. You know, we see all these forms and boxes labeled official use only. Mm-hmm. Computers are stupid. They're doing what they're told. And filling in the blanks of the form, fill in your name, and you overwrite that. You send in too many characters. You're overwriting the official use only form. If the computer was not programmed correctly, it's going to overwrite it and promote you to the next grade or admit you to college or something improperly because the program wasn't doing what it was supposed to. You know, the first computer worm that hit the internet took advantage of that, among other things. And it had been known academically for years until somebody actually tried it and showed, I can do this in the real world. You have to think it's experiment all you want. Again, I caution you both as a legal and as an ethical matter, don't try this on a computer you don't have permission to do it to. But explore your own computer. Find out what happens if you try something weird. That's the way things work. That's the way you learn how things work. You take them apart.
So, Stephen, you had mentioned some of the hacking that has taken place at some of the department stores, et cetera. So what really is the best way for folks to protect themselves when they're online shopping?
So that's actually a little bit of a trick question. if you're in the United States, my best advice is don't worry, because by law, you're not liable for more than $50 of fraudulent credit charge, and no bank these days is holding you liable for even those $50. You're better off legally with a credit card than a debit card. That's a current legal technicality. But my answer there is don't worry. If your credit card number gets stolen, it's a bit of a nuisance. It's a few hours of your time filling out forms to say this charge is valid, this charge is not valid, or what have you. But don't worry about it. More generically, advice, whenever you can, enable two-factor authentication. Many sites enable this. Some forms are better than others. There's something called U2F, Universal Second Factor, or FIDO Alliance, I don't know what that stands for. And that's actually something you can plug into a USB port or even hold near your phone with some models, NFC, to log you in to authenticate you. And that's really strong protection. There are weaker ones where you have an app that will display a number on your phone that you type in. The weakest form is it sends you a text message. It's even the weakest form is far stronger than a password. Strong passwords for technical reasons greatly overrated as a defense, but that's something the websites can do easily, so they insist on it. Your email account is your most valuable account because that's what you use for reset messages when you've forgotten a password. Mm-hmm. Don't reuse passwords. Reusing a password is a much bigger sin against security than picking a weak password. If you can, use a password manager. For many people, writing down passwords, as long as they're different for every site, is perfectly safe, It's a risk if somebody is going to go into your notebook where you write this down. High school students, if you're worried about your parents snooping on your accounts, maybe you don't want to write it down in a place that your parents can find. My kids are out of the house. They're adults. My wife and I trust each other. We're perfectly happy to write down passwords. Mm-hmm. Standard security advice to never write it down? No, that's wrong. It's not a national security secret. I'm not worried about Boris and Natasha sneaking into my house to steal my notebook with my passwords. That's not my threat model. When I was doing intelligence-related things, those passwords I didn't write down. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
That's an excellent comment, Steve. My wife and I have a book that we keep all of our passwords in, and clearly that stays here at the house, never leaves, and there are many times where we're getting that book out in order to log on to somewhere, but our passwords are complex, and so from a technical standpoint, that's what's important, and that we have a place where we can go and look at those passwords.
Absolutely. A lot of the standard advice is based on older technology, older threats. The advice, pick strong passwords, that's from 1979. In 1979, most people were still using physical hard copy computer terminals, things that had paper, not screens, and could type at the glorious speed of 10 characters a second. I mean, it's in a power user would have logins on 3 different computers. Today, I have hundreds of website logins, and I've got more computing power on my wristwatch than the supercomputers of 40 years ago.
Especially the device that's right behind you.
So you wonder what's right behind me. This is a replica of a special purpose device called a Bombe, B-O-M-B-E. This is a device that was originally invented by some Polish mathematicians in the 1930s. This is a replica at Bletchley Park, where the British used it to crack the German Enigma encryption. If you've ever seen the movie The Enigma Game, this is the device that they used, replica of it. The Poles invented it, the British improved it, and the Americans improved it still further a bit later in the war to deal with the German naval enigma. So this is a replica that I saw on a visit Bletchley Park in England a few years ago. And it's actually a good example of getting the threat models wrong. The Germans did not conceive of the British building a mechanized device to help crack encryption. They thought they had something good. They saw possibly it might be a theoretical possibility, but no one could try that many possibilities. And the British built these fast machines, and the Americans built faster ones.
Well, and Steve, to your point on the skills thing, where you talk about the psychology part, I think the Enigma is a really good example. And the Bomba that the Brits made for the 3-wheel, and we made the Bomba for the 4-wheel Enigma machines. And it was not the complexity of the Enigma, it was the frailty of the humans who were using it, because they were sending the weather out, and the first sentence of every message was "the weather today is," and it ended with "Heil Hitler." So since you knew those were the automatic sentences, it took that enormous, wonderful Enigma complexity and just narrowed it down, because you knew exactly what the encrypted clear text was for the first sentence and the last sentence. And yeah, so it's the human weakness.
The Germans made so many mistakes, fortunately, in how they used it. If they had used it properly, it's doubtful that it could have been cracked.
Right.
But they made so many mistakes. For example, to use the Enigma, you were told type 3 random letters. Oh, random letters, X, X, X. Who would guess that? The British called that sillies. Other things, it turned out to be hard to move the wheels on the Enigma. The British realized that they're not going to move it very much to the next message. So, okay, we'll take advantage of that. That was called the Herringbone tip.
Right.
As you say, people sending stereotyped messages. And some of these things, the Germans said, this is too sensitive. We won't explain to people why they have to do it in a certain way. And therefore, people ignored the rules because they didn't know why it was important. There was so many things that fortunately they got wrong in how they used it. And then when something went wrong for them and they wondered, was the encryption broken? They were psychologically incapable of believing that the allies whom they despised were capable of cracking their wonderful encryption system. So they were blind. They invented other excuses for what went wrong, instead of realizing, oh, we have a problem here.
Right.
And then you go back to my list of things. There was, again, you can do this security at any level. Is it? I have a doctorate, but I caught my first hackers when I was still in college. Cryptology is generally these days a branch of applied mathematics that's done at the PhD level, but one person who was inducted into the Cybersecurity Hall of Fame the same year as me came up with some spectacular innovations in attacking systems with just a bachelor's degree, a guy named Paul Kocher. Yep. So you can do a lot of this at any level. Some of the things, of course, you do need more education. I would not try to devise a crypto system without at least a doctorate and years of experience. I don't devise crypto systems anymore. The field has moved beyond what I know how to do. But all kinds of opportunities, all kinds of levels. Again, psychology, programming, networking, system administration, applied mathematics, it's all there.
Well, Steve, I really want to thank you on behalf of the Cyber Center for Education and Innovation at the National Cryptologic Museum for joining us today and giving us these great examples, especially your personal examples about the Enigma and the Bombay behind you, and the fact that you were actually at Bletchley Park and got to see that, and that's your picture of it, is really.
I try my best to use only my own pictures. All but one of the pictures, my slides were mine. So
thank you so much.
And folks, if you get a chance to visit the museum, it's a wonderful museum. I've been going there for 25 years.
Yes, and thank you, Steve, for that plug. We're in Maryland, and I know for the folks in Texas, it might be hard to get to Maryland, but we have a virtual capability with a telepresent robot now that will wander around, and you get to drive our telepresent robot around. And if that interests you, simply send me an email, and we can make those arrangements with your classes and actually put you right in front of the Enigma machine. And the Bomba that we have in the museum is from what I understand, the only surviving artifact from that time period. The one that Steve has, the Brits rebuilt, et cetera. And that one actually works. Ours, I think if you plugged it in, it might work, but no one wants to try that because it is an artifact versus the replica.
Is that one of the NCR four-wheel Enigma?
Yes, yeah. It was it's one of the NCR four-wheelers.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
let's fill people in on that a little bit. The German Navy didn't trust the regular Enigma, so they decided to make the Enigma had 3 wheels called rotors, and the Navy added a 4th one, which made it 25 times harder to crack. And the British machines, which were mechanical machines, just couldn't cope with that. They could not be sped up enough. They couldn't build 25 times as many. So NCR, then called National Cash Register Corporation in the US, built a much faster machine because it wasn't just mechanical, used vacuum tubes, was smart enough to, when it got an answer and had to overshoot, knew how to back up and get it. So it's another example of throwing technology at the problem. So and that was mechanical engineering and electrical engineering skills that went in there.
Right. And one of the things too, again, to show the human frailty in it, is to test the 4-rotor out. They sent the same message on the 3-rotor, which we could crack. Yep. And so we had the cracked message that they put on the 4-rotor. So it was a fairly easy thing to crack it on the 4-rotor.
Right. And just to sum up, in my career, I've done all sorts of computer security. I've done cryptology. I've done history of cryptology. I've done programming. I've done networking. I've done system administration. I'm not a psychologist, though. I just try to watch what's going on, the human factors of it. Plenty of room for all of this. And thank you all for coming. I'm going to put my slides up on my website. They'll be there in about 10 minutes.
And Steve, if you want to send them to us, we'll put them up with these talks as well.
Absolutely. I will do that.
Okay. And just for everybody's knowledge, our next session will be on the 26th of May, where we're going to talk about the adversary and some of the principles behind actually looking at in more detail the adversary. So please feel free to come to our site, ccei.nepris.com, and you'll get to see all of our talks in this cybersecurity series. Again, thanks everyone for coming. We appreciate you being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody who joined. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.